So just a little quick blurb about Student Village and Youth Dynamics. I think it's important to know that both companies have been in the industry for more than 20 years. We've been connecting brands to youth, youth to brands, understanding the youth market in such a diverse way. We're well placed to connect you and your brand, your organization, company, your corporate employer program, you name it, with this youth that we're looking at today. And Andrea will expand on the youth segment and the demographics of this of the survey. I think key to note, we've got core pillars in research, insights, being able to connect physically, virtually with this audience, as well as on the bursary side, that's specifically on Student Village side. Youth Dynamics are research specialists. That's what they live, eat, sleep, and breathe. They're able to conceptualize, implement, and execute a variety of methodologies, and we'll work with you to make sure that they're getting the best information out on the youth side. It's also important to note that we're able to access more than 2.5 million youth through our partners, through media platforms on and off campus around the country. All right, just a little update on what we're going through. If you can hear my dog barking in the background, that's Nala, she's saying hi. We're going to quickly take you through a lay of the land, the landscape, I think in South Africa and the world briefly. And we're going to talk about who the study is about and key emerging themes that have come out of it. And then we're going to get into some spend items. We'll also know that you're keen to understand. Nala. All right, so quick one, why Gen Re? So I think it's important to note that this audience, and we'll get into how optimistic and energized and enthusiastic they are, but it's worth noting that they are all about resetting. So we've called them Gen Re. They are Gen Z, but it's a resetting, reimagining. They are recalibrating the way the world is doing things from the ground up. They are purpose-driven, and that's why today we're calling them Gen Re. All right, a quick look at the lay of the land. So the macroeconomic landscape is not kind to Gen Z, Gen Re at the moment. There is rampant unemployment in the youth space. It's an awful statistic, and we're well aware of that. There's the cost of living, which is massively high, corruption, a large number of these macroeconomic environmental factors, including what's happening on a global stage, is out of their control, but it's having a direct impact. And this affects the psyche, this affects their opportunities and their ability to really drive forward compared to previous generations. Having said that, we have a couple of highlights to be mindful of. And the one here is a return to normal, but I've put normal in inverted commas because that's a reset from the Gen Re and Gen Z's perspective. Their new normal is almost a factory setting that is now standard with them. And so, you know, we're playing catch up as the rest of sort of the older generations. And they've taken to TikTok video in a massive way. I think so much so that it's seen as a virtual digital university. EduTalk, edutainment has taken off in a big way. And my colleagues were at a TikTok event last week, Friday, and brands are really looking at jumping on from an edutainment perspective. And I think that is something to be very mindful going forward. All right, I'm going to hand over to Andrea now, and she's just going to take you through the demographics of our research. Andrea, are you there? Just checking if Andrea is there.
No, I'm here. Sorry. Thank you. I just needed to be unmuted.
Sorry. There we go.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you so much, Jono. Awesome. Thanks very much. Just to take you very briefly through the demographics of our study. So the study involved nearly 3,000 young people between the ages of 15 and 34. What is really important, and based on other research that we've done in the space as well, is that it's become quite pertinent to overlay life stage on top of age segmentation. So not just to look at the various different age segments that we've looked at, but also to understand the level of maturity, education level, the exposure level, and also the family support and responsibility that this generation has, and how this actually impacts on their mindsets, behaviors, and attitudes. Thanks, Jono.
Cool, next page.
Then if we look at the age groups, so we concentrated quite strategically on the 15 to 29-year-olds, but not excluding the 30 to 34-year-olds, of which we had 12% of our sample. With regards to race, we followed a very similar race pattern to that of South Africa. And then from a gender perspective, we did have a higher gender skew with regards to female, and are investigating how some of the themes and stats that we present today are actually potentially looking at from a gender perspective. Then if we look at the living arrangements of these young people, so what was very interesting to us, even up to the age of 34, and we'll get into it a little bit later, we have 71% of them who are living with family. In the more detailed report, which we'll take you through a little bit later as well, we have broken the statistic down into who they are living with, and obviously family includes either both parents, mom, a dad, siblings, other family members. And then we have a much, much smaller percentage who are living on their own at 15%, as well as those who are living with housemates or with a partner. And this definitely touches on one of the themes that we speak about a little bit later. Then what is quite important to note is that our total sample, we had 22% of them who are, it looks like 22% of the total sample has children, and obviously you can see with regards to the percentages, this changes with regards to those who are in the different life stages between students, working students, and workers. What is really quite important to understand is that not just are we looking at this target audience as young people, but we also need to be considering them as parents, which is potentially a completely different way of marketing to them. I'm going to hand over to Jono to take you through some key themes. And what I wanted to just highlight is that the four sub-segments that we mentioned earlier on in the demographics, students, working students, and workers, have been used throughout this presentation as the four sub-segments in terms of life stages.
I don't have his contact anymore.
Can I send it to you?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to chat with him.
No, he's.
There we go. Just need to mute someone there. All right, great. So on to the key emerging themes. First up, let's start with Generation Snowflake. And so you might think of Snowflake as perhaps oversensitive or a bit too delicate. Not the case. We are looking at a uniquely original, as in a unique snowflake, but collectively strong. We're seeing this generation very much like a snowflake blizzard, if you will. They're a strong collective, totally confident and hugely optimistic. So much so that we've sort of seen like a fixer mindset. And if you look at some of the disruptions that have taken place, both locally and globally, you're seeing that it's not just about collectivism anymore. It's about taking it to the streets. It's about taking it to the source and really moving away from what we would see as a mass produce or a cookie cutter approach. It does represent a challenge from a brand's perspective because you need to be uniquely in tune with what's happening with this audience, but it also presents an exciting opportunity because there's an opportunity for collaboration at every turn with this generation. On the heels of Generation Snowflake, what we're seeing is a need for self-preservation. We've seen a massive values breach. There is a huge inequality and injustices that this generation are exposed to and feel. And so they've got the sense that no one's going to look after them but themselves. They're looking for a balanced life. And I think we can look at COVID and how we were looking before COVID as a way to look at an integrated life, a balanced life, life-work balance, work from home, etc. COVID was what we needed in that respect to really push the agenda. But Gen Z were talking about it long before COVID took place. And there is a huge emphasis now on protecting my mental health, my personal space. And we're seeing this audience is not prepared to take the status quo. They're wanting to disrupt in many respects. And this is where we've seen the rise of the side hustle. It's interesting to note that in our previous research, we tracked the side hustle as a source of income growing steadily. Now, in our previous student spend research dating back to 2010, it only factored in as a 1 or 2%. 10 to 12 years later, it's now 1 in 3 youth between aged 15 to 34 has a side hustle. And we feel that it's more mainstream now than ever before. So much so that 28%, so almost 1 in 3 of working young South Africans have a side hustle. Many of you here on the call today would probably have one. And they're looking at a fully integrated way of doing not only their career, but also their side hustle. And I think it's important to note that corporate South Africa is starting to catch up. A number of policies are being changed to allow for this, this side hustle, this gig that you've got on the side. That is my passion project. That is something to help support my income so that I can enjoy a few finer things. Millennials were all about YOLO. Generation Z, Gen Z are looking at YOLO 2.0, beyond YOLO. It's not so much the you only live once sort of mantra. It is very much a shift in values. I wanting to be living an integrated life. We've talked about the Great Resignation that has been widely publicized, but Gen Z are looking at an integrated life. So yes, I want to have my outdoor activities, or I want to have my home life space protected, but I also want to be working. I want my side hustle. I want to look after my mental health. It is all encompassing in one key life worth living and doing it right first time, and not sort of getting into the pitfalls from previous generations. There is a key focus on spending time with core family and friends, which I'll touch on just now. And it's important to note that this audience, while education remains key, which is important from a life stage perspective, living a meaningful life is as important to this audience. All right, we've talked about the recalibration, part of why we've named them Gen Z, but it's really about back to basics. I think it's looking at a reset of the values. There's been a big shift away from being driven just by the bag, chasing the paper. It's not about all money and materialism. There is a level of wanting to live comfortably, so absolutely. But it's also to ensure there are key importance of values and getting back to the basics in that respect. So much so that 36% of this audience, although education is key, and having not really had much work or life experience, are already driven about having a happy and comfortable life over money alone. We've seen this as a massive trend in the Gen Z space post-COVID, and a lot of research that we've done for our other clients recently points to this, that the key influences from a Gen Z's perspective are their immediate inner circle, close family and friends ahead of community. And I think it's really important to note that from a brand's perspective, it's about staying the course with this generation. You can't dip in and dip out. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be not necessarily always on, but present in authentic ways, align with values. And that way you'll be able to start to develop the relationship and develop the trust. It's not going to happen overnight. And then I've got the line there that we've used a number of times: treat me like you want to get married. So the generation are looking to be courted in many respects, but they're quick to swipe right or swipe left. So just be mindful of that. It's got to be aligned to values. Really, really great stat this. 90% of the young adults, of youth here, are supporting brands that share and demonstrate their values. And I think one example I want to highlight is recently Adidas's response to the Kanye West anti-Semitic comments that he put out there. It took Adidas as a brand more than 2 weeks to respond. And there was such an internal groundswell of support for sort of, the Jewish community specifically, and how they were going to call Adidas out for not making a stand and taking a stand. And this is what the challenge of brands have. You've got to look at being authentic. You've got to be consistent and, pin yourself to your values, fly them high, and be proud about them. I think Nike is a brand that does it exceptionally well. Obviously Colin Kaepernick is a widely publicized example of this. Cancel culture. It sounds negative, But really what this audience is looking to do is call you out as brands on inconsistencies. They're looking for the authenticity, but consistently. So not just when it suits brands, not when it's Black Friday, not when it's Christmas or Easter or key retail periods. It's really important to be consistent 365 days a year. This generation have been exposed to a lot of hate, injustice, and inequality. At such a young age, they've been exposed to so much negativity that they're calling brands out and making sure that their realignment of values is paramount to them and the brands that they want to align to, or the brands that they're going to let into their inner circle. All right, creative activists. We're looking at an audience that are lateral free, really independent thinking, and there's creativity and activism on both sides. So yes, it's like a fees must fall. It's calling out the status quo that doesn't work for them, but they are creative in the way they tackle exercises, tackle the challenges, or tackle their inequalities, tackle their lack of opportunity. You can look at the side hustle becoming more mainstream. They have a diverse range of interests, and this, again, presents opportunities to express themselves, but also again a chance for brands to join and be a part of that self-expression and be a part of that journey. Interestingly, from our research, time outdoors, all things music, and cooking and baking, surprisingly, came out head and shoulders as the key activities in my spare time that I want to engage with. And so this is a good starting point for brands to consider how they're engaging with this youth and the generation audience across those. And obviously there's more that can be coming out of the full report. We've talked about education as an enabler. It's interesting to note that education is the #1 priority of this audience. It is not a surprise because of the life stage that they're at. We've looked at the 15 to 34. So you've got high school, upper high school, you've got student, you've got even a working student, and those who are just starting out in their careers with the side hustle component. Platforms like YouTube and TikTok are driving an informal way of education post a formal degree or formal qualification. Just letting my dog keep quiet there. Right, I'm going to hand over to Andrea just to finish off on some of the key themes at this point.
Thanks, Jono. So I'm going to be taking you through some key themes that are slightly more negative. I know Jono mentioned earlier on that this audience is strongly faced by a negative macro environment. And one of their key pressures, which we have seen from across the board, and even in terms of previous research that we've done, is whether they can make ends meet. There's high levels of stress, which is the next theme that I will go through, but this really is exacerbating how they're feeling about things, their approach to things, and this obviously determines the prevalence of mental health issues, although this generation, as we have seen, has a very strong tendency to speak about and speak openly and honestly about mental health issues, and they're definitely looking for brands to assist them in this particular narrative and conversation. Some of the big worries across the board, this is again across the 15 to 34-year-olds, and we delve more deeply in the report into each of these per life stage. But as Jono mentioned, the importance of education. On the flip side, the stress of finishing their studies and actually getting an education comes through as their #1 worry. This is very closely followed by the importance for financial security, and as I mentioned earlier on, the potential to make ends meet, and really stressing about money and financial issues. Third on the list is load shedding, which I think has affected every single South African, and definitely affects young people very strategically in their quest for getting an education, making money, running their side hustles, being online, all of those things that are really quite critical to them. Load shedding has negatively affected them. And then from an unemployment perspective, Jono did mention it earlier on, but not really a big surprise in the sense that we unfortunately have such a high youth unemployment rate, and this definitely comes up as their fourth key worry. Then just to build on from that, I mentioned earlier on that they are a significantly stressed generation, and our research shows that 2 in 3 young people between the ages of 15 and 34 are stressed. This is a really worrying statistic. They technically should be at the forefront of their young adult lives, looking forward to being independent, being free, doing all those positive, beautiful things that young people do, and harnessing that positive energy that Jono mentioned earlier on in some of the key themes that he spoke about. But unfortunately, there is a bit of a dark cloud in terms of them feeling exceptionally stressed. Then another key negative trend that we've picked up through the research is the potential codependent cohort. And we really see here that young people seem to have extended their dependency, especially in terms of living at home and living with family members. I know I mentioned it earlier on in terms of those who are living with family, but it's very complicated and very expensive for a lot of young people to actually leave home and leave their families behind and go on an independence journey. So the question we're really asking here is, are we creating a generation of dependence? Obviously, there's a very strong imbalance between the cost of living and the income that these young people are earning, especially on a per person basis. And as Jono already mentioned, in terms of the importance of the side hustle, it has become apparent that having a job is not enough for them to be able to make ends meet. One of the things that we have seen from the research is that they not only are getting into a side hustle because they can't find employment, but they are also wanting to get into a side hustle because it allows them to be more independent, and it is followed by providing them with an additional source of income, which is obviously much needed. Thanks, Jono. So just some stats to add to what I was speaking about. 30% of those who are working are contributing financially to the family unit, both immediate and extended. And whilst this might not seem a huge percentage, if you think back to your own youth, when you were kind of setting off and getting more independent, you didn't necessarily have the strong responsibility and need to contribute financially towards your family. And then, as I mentioned earlier, 64% or 2/3 of our young working adults, so those who actually do have a full-time or part-time job or are running a side hustle or their own business, are still living at home in some form or other. Then the third negative trend is really the lack of experience, both from a practical experience perspective as well as from a life skills perspective. This is definitely something that we've seen coming through really strongly in the work that we've done within the school space, and as well as in the student space, where a lot of young people are almost excluded from the formal job market. And they seem to be entering their young adult lives completely undercooked, with limited amounts of life skill experience. They obviously don't have the practical or relevant experience on the job because very few of them are actually doing a part-time job. And even though we saw the rise of the side hustle, this isn't necessarily always providing them with the relevant skills or life skills that they would be required in the working world. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple of stats with regards to the spend and the spend potential of our target audience. So firstly, if we had lots of fun crunching numbers, and one of the things that you'll be interested to understand, and is something that has been a trend within the young adult space for a couple of years, is that they obviously have a multiple number of sources of income. And this has obviously just become a lot bigger, as we mentioned, in terms of the rise of the side hustle becoming a lot more important. They get the majority of their income from their parents, especially obviously those who are either still staying at home or those who are scholars and students. And then we obviously have those who are employed, as I mentioned, either full-time, part-time, or running their own business. There's a number of them who are obviously getting income from a side hustle, as well as from a bursary or a sponsor, and quite a number of them who are on a SASSA grant, and then the last percentage rounding up their other family. If we look at their spend, what is very interesting to understand, and I'll take you through the RAND values in terms of the spend now, but what is very interesting is that this generation, and we've seen this in other research that we've collectively done, they potentially don't have as high from a spend perspective per person for a number of reasons, including obviously inflation, the rising cost of living, the stressful macro environment that we spoke about, but they collectively have a much bigger pool of spend just because there are so many of them. So they definitely are still an extremely important target audience. In terms of their key priorities, we've looked at the top 5 key priorities on this slide, and obviously in the report there is much more detail into, I think it's 18 different categories that we've looked at in terms of where they're spending their money, and we've looked at it across the various life stages. So from a scholar perspective, you'll notice that their key spend is mobile phones, fashion, going out, study materials, and beauty or cosmetics. What is very important to note with the scholars is that all 5 of their top key spending items are self-focused. So they all are focused on their own kind of needs and wants, which is generally where it should be in that specific age group. This does, however, change as they get into the student working and working age group. And as we mentioned earlier, the rising costs of living and making ends meet start taking a toll. Some of the key spend items for students, working students and workers, include groceries as number 1. Transport comes through there quite heavily as well as mobile phones. With regards to obviously the student, they obviously have some study materials, and what you will notice in terms of all 4 target age groups is that beauty or cosmetics comes through in the top 5 in all 5 of those categories. We think this definitely speaks to the importance of image and how you obviously portray yourself in real life and obviously online, and there's a lot of opportunities with regards to this space and how brands can capitalize on that in a positive manner. Then the next 2 slides really provide you with more detail in terms of the table that I've just spoken through. It breaks down the 4 age segments into the amount of spend or potential spend that these various sub-segments are spending across the various top 5 categories. We do have the stats obviously across the 18 different spend categories. What you'll notice with regards to the students versus the scholars is that your students have higher spend potential than your scholars, which would make sense because they are more likely to engage in some level of a side hustle or some level of a job. And then the rands on the side are the estimated billion rands that they are spending with regards to each of those categories. So as I mentioned earlier, collectively, they are already spending a decent chunk of money. Similarly, with regards to the working students and the workers, again, I want to bring your attention to the scale on the left-hand side, where the working students are, interestingly enough, still sharing quite a lot of characteristics in terms of spend categories with their full-time student counterparts. And then you can see in terms of the workers, just in terms of their numbers and also their spend potential, how much the RAND potential actually jumps in terms of how much they are spending with regards to various categories. Collectively, the spend value and potential, as I mentioned earlier on, because of the number of young people that make up the 15 to 34-year-old age group, they've got the potential to spend 3.3 billion, which is an insane amount of money. And this is specifically the disposable income that they have available for things that they obviously are buying for themselves, for their own wants and needs, and potentially for those of their children. This figure does not take into account the potential influence that young adults 15 to 34 have within and on the family market, which is an additional conversation topic. Then if we look at their savings behavior, they're not just spending their money, but they're also saving their money. Our research shows that 2 in 3 15 to 34-year-olds are actually aiming to save their money. And the graph in the middle really just shows their heightened awareness of the rising cost of living. So what we see from the research is that they are expecting to spend, so 56% are expecting to spend more money in the next 12 months, with 31% of them expecting to spend the same amount of money. And this just really shows how frugal and aware they are of the rising cost of living, how much things cost, where their money needs to be going to, and they're so much more savvy with regards to money management. And this presents a really big opportunity for a lot of brands to actually assist and support these young people in terms of making them more aware and being quite frugal and intelligent with their money. As we mentioned earlier on, Jono mentioned it with regards to the side hustle, but 34% of them do actually have a side hustle. And as I mentioned earlier on, one of the key reasons that the 15 to 34-year-old target audience has a side hustle is because it allows them to be independent, which really just speaks through to some of the key trends that Jono spoke about earlier on in terms of individuality and creative activism. Then they're not just spending large sums of money, they're also have the opportunity to be loyal. We asked young adults between the ages of 15 and 34 how likely they would be to sign up and use a loyalty program. And 79% of them were positive with regards to this question. This just really shows that there definitely is a large potential to engage them in a positive manner, obviously in the manner that's authentic, as Jono mentioned earlier on, and there's huge opportunities to provide real rewards and real value, not necessarily only monetary, with regards to their loyalty and across any category. Then we looked very briefly at online buying. The question we really ask is how much time and energy are you spending on your online marketing? Our research shows that 82% of 15 to 34-year-olds are actually looking for information about products, services, and brands online. We've seen with other research that we've done that this is very much their go-to option, and it's a space where this generation is able to get an unbiased opinion through things like websites, online searches, podcasts, peer reviews, vlogs, etc. And then research also shows that 72% of them are likely to be buying something online, which I think is jumped quite dramatically from pre-COVID, which obviously COVID has absolutely exacerbated this online behavior and their tendency to adopt online buying. Then lastly, with regards to social media, not a huge surprise here for us at all, but what is quite important is that the three most used and most relevant social media apps for 15 to 34-year-olds is WhatsApp, coming in at first place, which isn't a huge surprise, especially because a lot of WhatsApp conversations happen between friends and family, as Jono mentioned earlier on, real connections, real people, keeping your inner circle of trust close. That is one of the key reasons why WhatsApp is so important. This is followed by Instagram, where a large percentage of them obviously enjoy the visual appeal and aspirational nature of Instagram, although we have seen with some qualitative research that we've done that some young adults do feel that it is relatively toxic. And then third is really YouTube, and as Jono mentioned earlier on, their go-to education platform is definitely YouTube and TikTok, and their preferred medium of instruction a lot of the time is videos and vlogs and using visual cues and visual, auditory and sensory experiences to learn and experience things. I'm going to hand over to Jono, who just wants to do a quick wrap up in terms of some of the key themes and stats that we discussed in today's presentation.
Great, Andrea, thank you so much. Right, everyone. I think there's one slide that will help you with a key takeaway, and you can start discussing internally with your teams. This is it. It really just summarizes what we've gone through over the past sort of 40 minutes. And I think it's just mindful to be aware of key emerging and key themes within this generation, this 15 to 34 market. The generation snowflake, a reminder, it's not about being oversensitive, it's the individuality, but it's the collective fixer mindset. Real optimism, real energy, looking at beyond YOLO, looking at an integrated life that is balanced and comfortable, looking at a key source of values, going back to the basics, and with a key inner circle of trust. Generally a fully embraced diversity, so it's no longer a one sort of cookie cutter approach, one size fits all. They're very creative, they're diverse, they're asking brands to join them, collaborate on their journey. Education remains key, and although it's not foolproof, it really is, I think, an area of the life stage that we're at with this particular audience. Be mindful of the negative effects of the macro environment. They're playing and placing this audience under immense pressure and a massive strain on the resources of Gen Z. And we feel the side hustle is no longer a side hustle, it's more mainstream. It's interesting to note the average spend is less. So when we last did our student spend specifically in 2019, the student spend we've seen has decreased from 2019 to 2022. Not by much, but it's been a significant impact. And obviously this audience has grown, but their average spend per person is less, but as a collective, much greater. And we've seen that in a potential market size of 303 billion. Also, online buying is up, and I don't see this going anywhere anytime soon. We've also seen a wonderful sort of innovations with brands like ShopRite and 6060. So it's just being made more convenient for this generation to make their purchases. All right, Andrea, I think we've got a few questions at this stage, which before I get to that particular section, I want to go through. And if you could just help me with the answers. So Grace asked, on average, how much are students and working students earning to sustain their lifestyle? I'll start with the student part. Students in this 2022 survey are earning on average per month, or spending per month, in the region of 1,900 Rand per month. On, that's you extrapolate it over 12 months, you'd get sort of a regional spend of less than 24,000 Rand per annum. And that's across the board. Just be mindful from a student perspective, that doesn't include tuition. So that excludes a main cost of tuition, but it's their disposable income. From a working student, it is a slightly higher total. It moves towards the region of 3,200, but they've got supported different streams of income that they're able to use and leverage off, in particular, the working side. All right, then, follow-up question there from Diane was, what percentage of South African population does this segment make up? Andrea, do you want to assist with that?
Sure. So I'm actually just looking at that. So we specifically looked at the 15 to 34 age group. We have included those who are in formal schooling from a high school perspective, from a full-time student perspective, from a part-time student perspective, from a working perspective, in whether full-time, part-time, or running their own business or side hustle. We have not included those young people who are necessarily unemployed or who are not in education, training, and employment at this point. If you want to have this conversation a lot more, I'm very happy to pop it through on email. We've got some details with regards to the size categories and population percentages.
All right, great. Thanks, Andrea. Next few questions. We've got quite a few coming through. Thanks for putting them in the chat. The first one is from a few people. It was John, but I think shared by a number of them, was the mobile value spend. Does that include data as well?
Yes, so the question included everything with regards to mobile phones.
Data,
so data,
airtime, and mobile phones.
Yeah.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you. Then the next question we've got here is from Megan. Thank you very much. Could you send the rest of the social platforms research on a separate piece? So absolutely we can, Megan. What we'll do is we've got, I think I can move into the next slide shortly, but this report in its entirety is available for purchase, and it will be available from early December. And so our contact details are coming up just now, and you can reach out, and that gives you a greater insight and in-depth from a social media perspective. Andrea Pulle has now asked, where does TikTok sit in their social media behavior? So obviously we list top 3 apps.
I think it was 4th. It came up 4th after YouTube, if I remember correctly.
Great. And then Rafila has asked, do you have information on what they are buying online? Is it food, clothes, data, etc.?
Yeah, we did ask a question in terms of categories and how likely they would be buying certain categories online. So yes, we do have some indication around that. Correct.
So the full report would reveal all of that.
Yeah.
All right, let me just see if there are any other questions here. Okay, Ross has got a long message. Let me just read this quickly. Sure. Okay, Ross, I think what I'll do, it's quite a long one to read out. I'll actually discuss with Andrea, and we'll reach out and message you personally.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's definitely, it's a very, very good question. And I think there's definitely some really key implications for corporates, as well as those thinking about graduate employment and how this actually affects things like corporate culture and the like. Yeah.
All right, great. And then the next question coming from David, does the detailed report expand on demographics and of the sample size? Absolutely. It goes into great depth, and not just of the youth cohort of 15 to 34, but in the different segments as well. So it'll be scholar, student, working student, and working youth. All right, great. So the question time. But before I think, let me just finish up before I get to the questions. So I think it's just worth noting just some key areas if you're looking to get an understanding of this youth in an even greater way. support with your strategy and understanding Generation Z, Gen Re. The full report is available. We're also able to offer real-time insights, immersions, a day in the life of a youth across a variety of different venues and locations, as well as insights into strategy and your own research. So just be, have that on your radar. All right, so on to the prize. So our CEO has launched his book, Breach. It is how the next generation are consciously disrupting the world. And this is the book that we're giving away. So it is available for purchase, but for 2 lucky people, you will get a signed copy. And how it'll work is we're looking for the fastest fingers and correct answers in the chat. And the first question, so get ready. Let me give you a moment to get ready. Is what is the collective spend of Gen Re, Gen Z? Fastest fingers first. Gabby is looking out and supporting me. I see the numbers are going up there. Gabby, you're going to have to let me know just on WhatsApp who the winner is, and I'll announce that. Okay. The first person, according to Gabby, who is our moderator on the chat, is, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correct. Is it Dirajo? I just see the name there, Dirajo. Let me make sure. Dirajo, is that the correct pronunciation? You're able to unmute. The correct answer is 303 billion from a collective spend perspective. So Dirajo, I'll get in touch with you and we'll make sure we get a signed copy to you. Well done. Hard luck for those who finished just outside of the first of the questions, the answer there. All right, and then last question as a way of wrapping up. Can you give me one of the top 5 priority areas of scholars? One of the top 5 priority areas of scholars. See people are typing furiously, putting responses in. There could be one of 5 answers. So Gabby's just checking, and she will send me her screenshot shortly. Just waiting for it to load. All right, fastest fingers first. One of the top 5, and we're just going to just check and confirm. We had, and we're going back here, so we know it's accurate. Mobile phones, fashion, going out, study materials, beauty and cosmetics. So Gavin McGregor, you are the winner here. Gavin McGregor, well done. I'll get in touch with you. You've won the book, signed copy. Well done. Congratulations. And I'll be getting that book through to you afterwards. All right. Let me get right to the end here. As a way of wrapping up, thank you very much for joining us on Gen Re, Youth on a Mission.